In a previous episode, we explored several disturbing encounters involving a creature long feared within Navajo tradition, an entity said to move with unnatural speed, mimic familiar voices, and stalk the lonely highways of the American Southwest. Those stories were unsettling enough, yet they represent only a fraction of the reports that continue to emerge. In this episode, we return to the shadows once more to examine a new collection of chilling encounters that are every bit as harrowing as the first. Some time ago, we examined a series of reports describing encounters with something far older and far stranger than the landscape it inhabits. Amongst those accounts were stories from highway patrol officers who had come face to face with something that ran faster than any human should, a mechanic who confronted a misshapen figure on a quiet marina, and a family who watched three impossible silhouettes gather at their fence line in the dead of night. These stories painted a portrait of a being unlike any other in American folklore, one that does not merely frighten but actively hunts. And yet those cases were only the beginning. Since releasing that episode, more reports have surfaced from across the Southwest, many echoing the same themes. A presence glimpsed just outside the glow of torchlight, the sound of footsteps approaching slowly across open ground, creatures wearing shapes that appear almost human but wrong in ways that defy explanation. Time and time again, witnesses describe the same unnerving details, the sense of being watched, of being followed, of hearing a familiar voice calling from the darkness when no one else is there. What is striking is not simply the number of these accounts, but the consistency between them. These are individuals separated by distance, culture, and circumstance, yet when pressed to describe what they encountered, their recollections form the same grotesque outline. They speak of figures that move as though their biomechanics do not work as they should, of eyes that glow with an intelligence that feels invasive, and of voices that imitate loved ones with chilling accuracy. For many, these experiences mark the end of ordinary life and the beginning of something far more troubling, a lingering fear that what they saw was not merely an animal nor a trick of the imagination, but a predator that had taken an interest in them specifically. In this episode, we explore 4 such encounters. Each one took place in a different setting, involving different people, and yet they share a disturbing cohesion, the unmistakable sense that something ancient, cunning, and deeply malevolent continues to stalk the darkened landscapes of the American Southwest. Whether these incidents represent encounters with a single species or with something far stranger remains unknown, but for those involved, the threat was unmistakably real. In the winter of 2010, a family who wished to remain anonymous experienced a series of events at their rural Utah home that would haunt them for years. Their property stood several miles outside the nearest town, bordered by woodland and open fields that looked peaceful beneath the December snow, yet felt increasingly isolated once night fell. That year, December arrived colder than usual, and the family found themselves staying inside more often. The first incident occurred on a Sunday evening a little after 9. Snow drifted quietly across the yard as the youngest child, a boy of 9, stepped outside to fetch firewood. He brought the family dog with him, a golden retriever who was usually eager to follow him everywhere. On this night, however, it refused to leave the porch. The dog stood rigid, staring towards the tree line. No matter how many times the boy called, the animal would not move, its hackles raised, its body trembling. Moments later, a bark rang out from the far corner of the property. It sounded identical to the retriever's bark, the same tone and rhythm, as if trying to get the boy's attention. Confused, he turned back towards the porch and saw his own dog still standing there, refusing to step into the snow. A second bark then echoed from the direction of the barn. The boy panicked and called for his parents. They hurried him inside, reassuring him that the sound must have been a coyote, although the behavior of their own dog troubled them more than they admitted. The next night, the family were awoken shortly after midnight by a heavy thump against the side of the house. Thinking that a branch had fallen, the father went outside to investigate, but the yard was undisturbed. No broken limbs, no animal prints, only a smooth white depression in the snow beside the wall, as though something had rested there for several minutes, before disappearing without leaving tracks. 2 nights later, matters escalated further. The mother was in the kitchen, preparing hot chocolate for the children, when she heard tapping at the window. Expecting to see her husband, she stepped closer and froze. A face was visible just beyond the glass. Its features were mostly hidden by frost, but she could see pale, taut skin and eyes reflecting the kitchen's light in a way no human eyes should. She screamed. Her husband ran to the back door, but when he stepped outside, the snow beneath the window was untouched. no footprints, no marks at all. Yet his wife remained adamant about what she had seen. They did not contact the police, believing the story too bizarre to be taken seriously. Instead, they kept the blinds closed after dark and brought the dog inside early. For a few days, nothing more happened. Then, on December 23rd, the father stepped outside to lock the shed for the night. The cold air assaulted his lungs as he crossed the yard, and the snow crunched underfoot. Just as he reached the shed door, he heard their dog whining behind him, but when he turned, the animal was standing on the porch. The whining, however, continued from somewhere off to his left. Then a soft voice called his name. It sounded just like his wife. He took a hesitant step towards the sound, then another. The voice repeated itself, "Yours now," but warped in a way he could not quite fathom, almost as if spoken through clenched teeth. He stopped suddenly, aware that the snow around him was pristine. No one besides himself had walked across it. As he backed towards the house, a tall figure emerged at the edge of the field.
Its arms hung too low, its posture bent forward, and its head shifted slightly, refusing to hold a fixed shape. It stepped towards him. The father fled, and as he ran, he heard the voice again, now imitating his daughter, calling for help in a tone she had never used. The family remained awake until dawn, puddled together in the living room, as something scraped its fingernails across the siding of the house, traveling slowly from one end to the other and back again. This went on for several hours. The dog hid beneath the coffee table and would not come out. When morning arrived, the only sign of their visitor was a single line of shallow impressions leading across the yard towards the fields. Each print was spaced impossibly far apart. They moved the following spring. Whatever had come to them that December had not wandered there by chance. It had come with a purpose. In 1998, retired Navajo Ranger Edward Nez was asked by a colleague to revisit a series of welfare checks he had conducted for an older couple living near Mexican water. Her daughter had contacted the rangers several times, concerned about things her parents refused to explain directly. Only after repeated visits did Nez begin to understand what had been troubling them. The couple were Thomas and Evelyn Nazi, lifelong residents of the area, who kept a small flock of sheep near a dry ravine behind the house. The first incident had occurred in late summer, when Evelyn awoke one night to the sound of someone knocking gently at the living room window. When she went to look, there was no one there. A week later, she heard her name being called softly from somewhere outside. Sometimes it sounded like her husband. Other times it resembled the voice of her sister who lived hours away. Evelyn dismissed these moments at first, assuming they were tricks of the wind or half-remembered dreams, but the disturbances became more frequent. One evening she glanced out of the kitchen window and saw a tall figure standing several yards from the house. It was difficult to make out any detail in the fading light, only a dark outline facing the home. She watched it for several seconds, waiting for it to move, but it remained perfectly still. When she finally looked away and called to Thomas, the figure was gone by the time she looked back. It was around this time that Thomas began sleepwalking again. He had done so as a boy, but Evelyn had not seen the behavior since the early years of their marriage. Now she would sometimes wake to find him standing in the bedroom doorway, eyes half open, head angled slightly, as though listening to something she could not hear. He never spoke during these episodes. He would simply turn, walk a few paces along the hall, and eventually return to bed without remembering any of it. The moment that unsettled her most came late one night in early autumn. Evelyn awoke to the sound of slow, measured footsteps outside the bedroom window. They moved back and forth across the gravel in a steady rhythm, pausing briefly at each end before turning again. Thinking an animal might be wandering close to the house, she rose to look. A figure was walking in the yard. Its outline was vague in the weak moonlight, but she could see the shape of its shoulders and the slight tilt of its head as she paced. The movements were oddly deliberate, as though the walker had rehearsed the path many times. She watched for several seconds before stepping back from the window. She turned to rouse Thomas, only to find the bed empty. Instead, looking past the end of the bed, she saw him slowly pacing up and down the hall beyond the bedroom door. He was asleep on his feet, moving slowly from one end of the hall to the other. But strangely, his stride matched the figure outside exactly. Each pause, each turn, each shift of weight mirrored the movement she had just witnessed. Through the window, she stood frozen, watching the two motions align for several long, quiet moments before gently waking him. When she later tried to tell their daughter what she had seen, she broke down in tears. Evelyn did not tell Nez about the pacing incident herself. It was her daughter who later explained it to him, after the couple had moved to stay with relatives. Nez examined the ground outside in the yard and found faint impressions in the loose gravel, though nothing else conclusive. When the couple returned, he witnessed Thomas sleepwalking for himself. The man's gait was slow and uneven, with the same slight tilt Evelyn had described. Nez could not say what it meant, but he understood why she had been frightened. The disturbances gradually faded as the weather cooled. The tapping stopped, the voices fell silent. The figure never appeared again. Yet the memory of that single synchronized moment remained with Evelyn, long after she and Thomas left the property. Nez closed the welfare file without any official findings. In his private notes, he recorded only that something outside the home had taken interest in the family, although its reason for doing so remained unclear. In February
2014, a highway maintenance worker named Jacob Thorne, aged 46, was assigned to clear a remote stretch of ridge road between Monticello and Blanding. Heavy snow had moved across the region throughout the day, and by nightfall, the road surface was already disappearing beneath drifts. Thorne had worked winter shifts for more than 2 decades and was familiar with the long, solitary nights that accompanied them. The routine rarely troubled him. On this particular evening, however, he later admitted that something about the silence felt unusually heavy. Shortly after 9 p.m., whilst moving through a high-exposed section of road,